And people keep being like, fight the violations. And I'm like, this is kind of like telling the woman to do better and maybe her husband won't hit her anymore. Oof. So this is my St. Patty's Day outfit. Having a rough day, actually. Hello, YouTube. But here we are, signing books. Can't be all bad. My preferred platform has been TikTok. It's the most fun for me, but it's super unstable and it's starting to feel like an abusive relationship. So I can now sell my signed book on YouTube. We have convinced YouTube that Daniela Mestenak-Young holds the copyright to Daniela Mestenak-Young's book. So we're figuring out how I'm going to spend more time there. There's not a good, YouTube isn't as good of a daily platform. Thing I learned, when you figure out you're neurodivergent, it's so great because then you get to figure out your flavor of it and what works for you. I've learned I'm not a morning person or an evening person. I'm an 11 to 4 person. And I have learned that I am an out loud processor. So I come and I talk and I listen and my brain's this little computer. And then I write down the stuff about leaving. I just wrote all this stuff about leaving religion, leaving the arts, leaving the dance world, just the exit costs of leaving normal things in society. Just because I just listened to everyone talk about it. So back to how I know Nation of Islam is a cult. Other than all cults are the same. This is why we look at the patterns and the tactics and the strategies. If you're telling people they're going to unalive by not being in your group, AA, that's a cult tactic. But also, I don't really care who gets mad at me calling their group a cult, because you can learn a lot by comparing yourself to cults. But I always know a group is a cult because I hear the cult baby experience. That's how I knew AA was a cult, because children of steppers have cult baby stories. The coercion, the manipulation, the exploitation of labor, your parents sacrificing you for the mission, it's always there. Nation of Islam, there's a great episode of A&E's Cult of Extreme Beliefs on Nation of Islam. And I love it because they really show the labor trafficking of the children and the young people in that cult. And they also show a very rare, just full-fledged apology by a father. And he was and he says, the way I see it, it's I put a nail through my kid's hand and I took it out and we took him to the hospital and it's healed now, but she still has a hole in her hand. And I'm so sorry for letting them do that to you. Yeah. So, and you know what? It's interesting because a year ago, I got told not to talk about Black groups. And I was okay. But now I'm you know what? I have relevant things to say here. Ultimately, everyone who has studied cults has said all cults are the same. And the belief system doesn't really matter. It's about the coercion, the manipulation, and the exploitation of labor. And of course, the power for the cult leader. And I just think those of us that grew up in it and now study it have this extra level of being able to be you could put me in any of these groups. And I swear I could point you to the financial exploitation, the labor exploitation, and the schmexual exploitation, in a day or two. Because it's always there and I know where to look and I know what to hear for it. When you say you grew up in a group, you probably had a cult baby experience. And honestly, the reason I'm here doing this is because it's helpful to know that you had a cult baby experience, because now you know, now you understand what happened to you. Like, I studied cults, I was doing a lot of the work, but I never understood why until I heard Dr. Janja Lalich say cults are all about labor. And then I was like, oh, that's what happened. All of a sudden it's clear. We're labor trafficked. That's what it was. Yes, I've heard of the Yellow Deli cult. Yes, it's a cult. It's a Front for 12 Tribes, which is another really bad religious cult that is very guilty of trafficking children and young people. And the amount of times I have heard people say, I know it's a cult, but their sandwiches are good, makes me a little bit stabby. Also, the Salvation Army is a cult, like a real cult, and always has been. I know, I was surprised too. Please don't shop at their thrift stores. Okay, first we gotta do all the ones we already have. Being in the TikTok penalty box for 7 days is going to give me time to sign a bunch of boxes of books and get them to my publisher so we can like streamline all our stuff. So, what? It's a box inside a box. I thought these looked funny. Okay. Yeah. Also, all these vet bros with their plans for martial law. This one bro is like, they do it one state at a time. Yeah, and they'd keep all the rest of us out of that state with all those walls you have built around those states. Like, no, when the people fight the government, the people win. The insurgents win. Drugs won the war on drugs. We could hold mountains in Idaho and all of Appalachia forever. The Salvation Army started in the 1920s by one William Booth, who set out to cure the world of the three evils of alcoholism, adultery, and atheism. And now I'm going to read to you about it from my book. The editor's already working on it. So I got to download a copy so I can accept the changes, and then I can read from it. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Enable editing. My editor's the best, and I've like co-written. She's edited me and co-written me for so long that I can just like accept all the changes. Also, I know my topic. All right. How can this organization be called a cult when it's so widely recognized, especially with a slogan like doing the most good? Most of us see it as a charitable institution with a mission to help those in need, often associated with kindness, giving, and a commitment to service. But behind that image lies a different story, as told by people who consider themselves survivors of this well-known nonprofit. This group, founded in 1930 by a man who wanted to achieve his goal of banishing the 3 A's of alcohol, atheism, and anarchy from England's underclass, literally sees itself as an army. It's steeped in military tradition, complete with ranks, uniforms, and a strict hierarchical structure. Full membership requiring complete acceptance of the group's regulations is called soldiership. Members wear uniforms as symbols of their dedication to the purity and the cause, serving a constant reminder of the discipline required to adhere to the group's order. But the military-style structure isn't just about maintaining order. It's about demanding unquestioning obedience to the higher ranks, especially the general, who has almost total power. Nearly 100 years after its founding, this organization continues with intense focus on religious evangelism that's carefully hidden from the public eye, along with controversial practices like burning music records, the belief in an imminent apocalypse, and extreme homophobia and racism that's often cloaked in subtlety. Members are expected to dedicate significant time and energy to spreading their faith, frequently at the cost of personal relationships or other pursuits. They're also not allowed to own property. This emphasis on evangelism can sometimes feel like coercion, with pressure to conform to rigid doctrines and practices, says one survivor who wished to remain anonymous. And yet, most people are unaware of any of this when they drop their spare change into those iconic red Salvation Army buckets during the holidays. My co-writer says she's not sure if this one is the right example for the sacrifice chapter, but I'm like, I just really want to tell everyone that the Salvation Army is like a legit cult for two reasons. One, because it surprised me. And then once I was like, oh yeah, no, well, it's legit a cult. Two things. I was like, the Children of God always bragged that they did more charity work around the world than the Salvation Army. So like, you were just still bragging about being better than another cult. And two, when I was like, wait, what? The Salvation Army is a cult, which I just found out by talking to people. And then people were like, oh yeah, I grew up in the Salvation Army, I can tell you everything you need to know. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you just did. Just from that one sentence, I'm pretty sure I know what your childhood was like. Like not the flavor, but like, and this is what was so interesting with people saying like, oh, you're too white to judge Nation of Islam. Like, so the Nubian Nation, which was another flavor of this, when we read her book, Jamelia Chisholm's book, The Community, about growing up from the ages of 3 to 5 in a Nubian Nation commune, like I have never read a better description of my own childhood, including my own description of my childhood. Like, and that was a Black Muslim cult, and I grew up in a white Christian cult. Identical. Different flavor. Nope. I'm gonna have to get off now if this person doesn't hang up, because I just accepted a random person. I don't know how. Ugh. I don't think it lets you kick the other person off. I don't know how this works. Go away. Nope. That was a little unfortunate. Okay, so the Salvation Army, yes. And it was sad to stop shopping there because obviously they have a good thrift store. But this is like what I tell people is like cults. So cults are about labor, right? Super important to understand, which also means that cults are criminal syndicates, right? They are organized crime. And I think we get a little lost in the word cult. And we're just like, oh, brainwashed. There doesn't have to be a why. But when I tell you, like, I really didn't understand my own childhood. And as soon as I heard this expert say, you know, cults are always about labor, it was like, oh, yeah, that's what it was. And that's what it was for you Mormon kids. And that's what it was for you Southern Baptist kids. And that's what it was for, I wrote a whole chapter on exploitation of labor. That's what I did last week. This week we're doing Jennifer. Jennifer got an upgrade to a signed book. I have to find her. Yes, organized crime in the government right now. Yes, it's interesting as all my worlds are coming together with military experience. And then people try to be like, they don't like my answer. And then they try to be like, you were just a captain. What do you know? Other than the captains are the operations planners. And that's what I did for 2 years at war. Nobody knows what's going to happen. That's why you're here listening to a cult scholar about national security and governance. Thank you. But I just started to tell people that I want to hear their plan for martial law, like their actual military plan. And people are like, well, they could try. And like, no. If Felon 47 woke up right now and was like, martial law, then what would have to happen is his planners. So for us, this was like battalion and brigade commanders to captains, us, right? But for the president, it's going to be like to colonels and generals, like go make a plan for martial law. And you cannot control 340 million people over nearly 4,000 square miles of incredibly varied terrain with borders that cannot be closed and two easily accessible oceans. You can't even make the plan to go fail at. Like, even for a bad plan, you have to have a plan. And all these people talking about this one guy was like, well, you're forgetting about air to air and blah, 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 and all this. And I'm like, you're not doing any of that with 20